Let's get right into it. Number 10, Clay Allison. You know that one friend who takes things way too far at a party? Well, imagine that friend has a gun, a drinking problem, and a penchant for public nudity. That was Clay Allison. This guy wasn't just a gunfighter. He was a walking, talking, chaotic event. Allison was known for being violent, unpredictable, and frankly, absolutely terrifying to be around. Most outlaws tried to keep a low profile, but Clay liked to ride through town completely naked. Why? Who knows? Maybe he hated laundry day, or maybe he just wanted to assert dominance in the weirdest way possible. But his eccentricities didn't stop at streaking on horseback. He once led a mob to lynch a convicted murderer, which is bad enough, but then he decided the job wasn't finished. He decapitated the guy and displayed his head on a stake at a local saloon. Just imagine walking into a bar for a quiet drink and seeing that staring back at you. Talk about a buzzkill. But the quintessential Clay Allison story involves a dinner invitation. A rival gunfighter named Chunk Colbert invited Clay to dinner. Now, usually, when your enemy asks you to dinner, you politely decline and move to a different state. Clay accepted. Why? Because he was crazy. Colbert, predictably, tried to shoot Clay from under the table, but Clay was faster. He shot Colbert dead, blew the smoke off his gun, and continued his meal. When asked why he even went, Clay dropped one of the hardest lines in history. He said he didn't want to send a man to hell on an empty stomach. You have to respect the hospitality, even if it was homicidal. Number 9, Cherokee Bill. Next up, we have Cherokee Bill, also known as Crawford Goldsby. This kid was basically the Gen Z of the outlaw world. Young, fast, and completely over it. His crime spree started when he was just 18 years old. Think about what you were doing at 18, probably trying to figure out how to file taxes or playing video games. Cherokee Bill was out there joining the Cook Gang and terrorizing the territories like he was trying to speedrun a criminal career. This guy didn't believe in taking days off. In fact, he seemed to specifically hate holidays. On June 17th, 1894, he killed a deputy sheriff. Then, just a few weeks later on the 4th of July, while everyone else was probably enjoying fireworks and stale bread, Bill killed 2 men. 2 days later, he killed a railroad worker. He racked up a body count of somewhere between 8 and 13 men in a very short time. He robbed banks, trains, stagecoaches. Basically, if it had wheels or money, Bill was going to shoot at it. His career came to a crashing halt when he was captured, but even then, he wasn't done. He tried to escape jail and shot a guard in the process. When they finally hauled him up to the gallows on March 17th, 1896, the crowd was expecting some big, tearful confession or a plea for mercy. Instead, when asked for his last words, Bill looked at them and said, "I came here to die, not make a speech." Cold. Ice cold. He checked out of life with the same attitude he had lived it, completely unimpressed by your rules. Number 8. Big Nose George. Okay, if you have a weak stomach, you might want to skip this one. We're talking about Big Nose George. Yes, that was his actual nickname. George Parrott was a run-of-the-mill bad guy who robbed trains, stagecoaches, and cattle. He ran with a gang that made a fatal mistake. They killed 2 lawmen who were tracking them. In the Wild West, killing a lawman is like poking a bear with a short stick. It brings the heat. A massive bounty was put on George's head and his nose, and he was eventually captured in 1880. But George wasn't the type to sit quietly in a cell. He tried to escape and ended up fracturing the jailer's skull in the process. This did not sit well with the locals. An angry mob, tired of waiting for the justice system, stormed the jail and lynched him. Now, usually the story ends there. The bad guy dies, roll credits. But Big Nose George's story gets weirdly biological after he died. Doctors at the time, who were apparently mad scientists in their spare time, decided George was too interesting to bury. They took his body and got creative. They sawed off the top of his skull and gave it to a 15-year-old girl who used it as an ashtray. Yeah, you heard that right. An ashtray. But wait, it gets grosser. They took skin from his thighs and chest and sent it to a tannery to be made into a pair of shoes. Someone literally walked a mile in Big Nose George's skin. Today, you can still see the shoes and the skull in a museum. It gives a whole new meaning to recycling, doesn't it? Number 7, Bill Doolin. At number 7, we have Bill Doolin, the founder of the Wild Bunch gang. Not to be confused with the other Wild Bunch, we'll get to them later. Doolin was like the CEO of outlaw activity in the Oklahoma and Indian territories. He wasn't just robbing for pocket change. This guy was running a startup that specialized in high-risk asset acquisition, mostly from banks and trains. Doolin and his crew were terrifyingly effective. They amassed an estimated $165,000. Now, in the late 1800s, that was an astronomical amount of money. Adjusted for inflation, that's millions of dollars today. Imagine a guy robbing a bank and walking out with enough cash to buy a small island. He was living the high life while the law was scrambling to catch up. But as the saying goes, more money, more problems. Eventually, the law caught up. Most of his gang was wiped out in shootouts, leaving Doolin exposed. He was captured, but because he's Bill Doolin, he didn't stay captured. He escaped jail by holding a guard at gunpoint. Classic move. However, his luck finally ran out at a farm where lawmen had him cornered. Instead of surrendering and going back to prison, Doolin decided to go out in a blaze of glory. He emerged shooting, but was met with a shotgun blast that permanently retired him from the robbery business. He lived fast, got rich, and died messy. Number 6. Jim Killer Miller. Meet Jim Killer Miller. If Clay Allison was the chaotic drunk at the bar, Jim Miller was the quiet guy in the corner taking notes. Miller was a professional. He was a hitman, an outlaw, and paradoxically, a former lawman. This guy played both sides of the fence and realized murder paid better. He is estimated to have killed between 12 and 50 men. That is a wide margin of error, but when you're that prolific, you probably stop counting after the first dozen. Here is the weirdest part. He only charged $150 per hit. $150 to kill a human being. Even back then, that seems like a bargain basement price. You'd pay more for a good horse. But Jim was efficient. In 1908, he was hired to take out a former deputy U.S. Marshal named Alan Augustus. Miller did the job, ambushing Augustus with a shotgun. But this time, the law didn't turn a blind eye. Miller and the guys who hired him were arrested. The local community, fearing that Miller's lawyers or connections would get him off the hook, decided to take matters into their own hands. A mob broke into the jail to lynch all 4 of them. Most men would be begging, pleading, or crying in that situation. Not Miller. He stood on the platform, completely emotionless. He looked at the mob, yelled, "Let it rip!" and stepped off the platform himself. He literally executed himself before the mob could do it for him. That is a level of calmness that is genuinely disturbing. Number 5, Sam Bass. Sam Bass is what happens when a gambling addiction spirals into a federal crime spree. Sam didn't start out wanting to be a legendary outlaw. He just wanted to win at cards. But after racking up some serious gambling debts, he realized that working a 9-to-5 wasn't going to cover the spread. So, he turned to robbing stagecoaches and trains, and surprisingly, he was really good at it. He formed the Sam Bass Gang and pulled off what is still considered the largest train robbery in Union Pacific history. They stole $60,000 in gold coins. That is a staggering amount of heavy metal to haul away on horseback. Imagine trying to carry 10 backpacks full of gold while running from the cops. That was Sam's Tuesday. After that score, he actually tried to retire. He had the money. He could have gone to Mexico and sipped margaritas, but greed is a funny thing. He formed a new gang to rob a bank in Round Rock, Texas. Big mistake. He had a rat in his crew, an informant who tipped off the Texas Rangers. When Sam walked into Round Rock, he wasn't walking into a bank. He was walking into a trap. A massive shootout ensued. Sam was wounded but managed to escape into the brush. They found him the next day, dying from his injuries. It's a tragic tale of not knowing when to quit while you're ahead. If he had just stopped at the gold train, he might have died a rich old man. Instead, he died in the dirt, betrayed by his own team. Number 4. John Wesley Hardin. If you looked up sociopath in a dictionary from 1870, you'd see a picture of John Wesley Hardin. This guy makes some of the other outlaws on this list look like choir boys. Hardin wasn't killing for money or business. He was killing because he had a short fuse and a very fast gun. He committed his first murder at age 15. 15. Most 15-year-olds are worried about acne. Hardin was worried about hiding bodies. He is confirmed to have killed at least 20 men, though he claimed the number was over 40. His victims were a mixed bag. He killed Union soldiers, civilians, and anyone who looked at him sideways. There's a famous story that he once killed a man in a hotel room just for snoring too loud. While that one is debated, it fits his vibe perfectly. He was eventually arrested for murdering a state policeman and a sheriff, which usually earns you a date with a hangman. Instead, he served 14 years in prison. During that time, he studied law, ironic, right? And tried to rebrand himself. But you can't teach an old dog new tricks, especially when that dog is a rabid killer. After his release, he moved to El Paso. In August 1895, he was playing dice in a saloon when a police officer he had threatened earlier walked in and shot him in the back of the head. The officer was acquitted. It turns out, when you kill 40 people, the jury isn't going to feel too bad when someone finally gets you. Number 3. Jesse James. You know his name. He's the Brad Pitt of the outlaw world, Jesse James. But before he was robbing trains, Jesse was getting his hands dirty in the Civil War. He started his life of violence at 16 with a pro-Confederate guerrilla group called the Bushwhackers. These guys weren't fighting on the front lines, they were participating in massacres. So Jesse's foundation was built on brutal, irregular warfare. After the war, he didn't want to get a regular job, so he formed the James Younger Gang. They robbed banks and trains across the Midwest, but here is where Jesse was smart. He worked the press. He wrote letters to newspapers framing himself as a Robin Hood figure, a Southern hero fighting against the mean Northern banks. Spoiler alert, he kept the money. He wasn't giving it to the poor, he was giving it to Jesse, but the public loved the story, and he became a celebrity. However, fame puts a target on your back. After most of his gang was killed or captured in a disastrous bank raid in Northfield, Minnesota, Jesse went into hiding. The reward for his capture was massive. Enter Robert Ford, a member of Jesse's own gang. Ford wanted the reward and the pardon. One morning, while Jesse was unarmed and dusting a picture on the wall, a rare domestic moment for a serial robber, Robert Ford shot him in the back of the head. The coward Robert Ford became legendary, but Jesse James remains the face of the Wild West myth. Number 2, Billy the Kid. At number 2, we have the kid who never grew up. Billy the Kid. Born Henry McCarty, this guy had a rough start. He was orphaned young and drifted into a life of petty crime, but things escalated quickly. He wasn't a hulking brute. He was small, quick, and had a smile that disarmed you right before he shot you. He became famous during the Lincoln County War, a bloody feud between rival cattle barons. Billy wasn't fighting for money initially. He was fighting for revenge. His employer, an Englishman named John Tunstall, was murdered, and Billy joined a posse called the Regulators to hunt down the killers. This wasn't justice, it was a war zone. Billy became a wanted fugitive, famous not just for killing, but for escaping. This kid was the Houdini of jails. He was captured and sentenced to hang, but he managed to slip his cuffs, kill 2 guards, and ride out of town whistling. He was 21 years old and had a reputation that spanned the entire country. Rumor had it he killed 21 men, one for every year of his life. While the real number is probably lower, the legend was real. He was eventually tracked down by Sheriff Pat Garrett, a man who used to be his friend. Garrett didn't take any chances with an escape artist like Billy. He shot him in the dark in a bedroom in Fort Sumner. Billy died asking, "Who is it?" He was a tragic, violent figure who became the poster child for wasted youth in the West. Number 1, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And finally, at number 1, we have the dynamic duo, the ultimate bromance of the Badlands, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. These two were different. Butch was the brains, the leader of the Wild Bunch Gang. He wasn't a psychopath like Hardin or a chaotic mess like Clay Allison. He was a planner. He treated bank robbery like a logistical puzzle. Butch was famous for setting up relay horses along his escape routes. He'd rob a bank, ride a horse until it was tired, swap it for a fresh one he'd planted miles away, and leave the exhausted lawmen in the dust. It was genius. And here's the kicker. For over a decade, they robbed banks and trains without killing people. They were thieves, sure, But they weren't murderers by trade. They were the gentleman bandits. But civilization was closing in. With the Pinkerton Detective Agency breathing down their necks, they did what any sensible outlaw would do. They packed their bags and moved to Bolivia. They tried to go straight, but old habits die hard, and they eventually went back to robbing payrolls. The official story says they were cornered by the Bolivian army and killed in a shootout. But here's where it gets spicy. Years later, researchers dug up the graves where they were supposedly buried. They ran DNA tests compared to surviving relatives. The result? No match. The bodies in the graves weren't them. So did they die in a nameless grave somewhere else? Or did they pull off the greatest escape of all time, return to the US, and live out their days in peace? That mystery makes them the undisputed kings of this list. So there you have it. From guys who turned into shoes, to naked gunfighters, and potential zombie outlaws who faked their own deaths. The Wild West was clearly a time where the only qualification you needed for a job was a lack of empathy and a surplus of ammo. It's fun to read about, but let's be honest, you wouldn't last 5 minutes. You'd probably get challenged to a duel for looking at a horse the wrong way. That's it for today's dose of historical weirdness. If your brain feels a few IQ points weirder now, or if you're just glad you live in a time with forensic science and indoor plumbing, do me a favor, smash that like button and subscribe. Don't make me put a bounty on your head. Catch you in the next one.